Hi, this is Scott Wallsten, President and Senior Fellow at the Technology Policy Institute. It is August 20th, 2019. This is the final day of the TPI Aspen Forum. And I'm here with CNBC's Brian Sullivan, who just interviewed DOJ's Megan Delrahim, and Needham's and TPI board member Laura Martin, who just came off moderating a panel on entertainment. So we're going to talk today about several things, but I'd like to start off by asking either of you, you all generally interact with a different kind of audience than we do. We talk to DC people mostly. What do you all think of people in DC, policymakers? Do you view them as naive about the way your worlds work?
I think they're late. I mean, one of the things we see in our world is each of the big platform aggregators are entering each other's businesses and they're about to go compete with each other. And now it's as the government is saying they have monopolies. Well, that was true 2 years ago, but it's not true today because everybody like Google is entering the social business and Facebook's trying to get into the search business and Apple's trying to get into everything. Everybody's getting into video. So it isn't anti-competitive. They're competing with each other. And some of them are going to get put out of business by each other. And meanwhile, the government's going to be trying to attack them as monopolists.
So if you think they're late, does that mean that there's something now that they should be paying attention to that you think they will be paying attention to in 2 years, but will be too late then?
Yeah, eSports and the rise of video game dominance in 5 years is going to have taken over all of the consumer time. And so none of these ad-driven platforms are going to work if they don't have consumer spending time. And therefore, but this is, even Wall Street is just coming to grips with this, which means it's probably 3 years in the future. And people who invest now will make a lot of money for 3 years, and the government will figure it out 5 years after that, after it's become the mass of consumer spending. Time spent under 25 years old is 2 hours a day on average, under 25. But those people, as they age up, suddenly become more important in the voter base. And then the government's going to be and that I think trend will start actually hurting other businesses over the next decade.
Brian, do you find that to be the same thing when you talk to people in tech policy? You talk to them and you're thinking behind the scenes, Jesus, we should have been talking about this 2 years ago. They don't know what's going on.
First off, thanks for I never get interviewed. So this is like I'm nervous right now. I just want to be clear on this. I might, stumble. So thanks for having me here at the conference. And I agree with Laura. I mean, the one point we didn't get into with making this today, but I probably could have, is if you look at antitrust things over the years, going back 100 years, this is not a new development. By the time antitrust takes so long, by the time you start something, by the time it's over, it's almost irrelevant. I mean, there was a case in the 40s or 30s. I went to law school, but my brain is GM was buying up all the railroads in Los Angeles and basically systematically disassembling them so you'd sell you more cars. Yeah. So by the time but they were, it was under the American Railcar Corporation. Can't remember all the details. The point is, by the time the case was decided, I think if my memory serves correctly, GM was fined $1 because at that point, all the freeways were built and what the hell was the point anyway? So I think when you look at government agencies and some of these, government workers who do great jobs, I think that they're hamstrung just by the size of some of these things that they're dealing with. I mean, and also just government isn't the fastest moving entity in the world, right? What's the thing? Move fast and break things. But the government is the exact opposite of that. It's not their fault.
Not quite the opposite. They move slow and break things.
They make, or sometimes break things up, right? Which is sort of the antitrust thing, Scott. So I don't think it's their fault. But yes, and I was really fascinated by what Laura just said about video games, because here we are sort of having these discussions about the possible investigation of some of the big tech companies, maybe over search, maybe it's over data, whatever it is. And yet the 22-year-old, the 18-year-old in America isn't Googling anything. He's playing Fortnite.
It's true.
Now, when they can find a way to put search ads on Fortnite, or whatever game is big then, because
you should start that company.
What you need to be able to do is be playing, and I've never played it, but I know what it looks like, and be like, hey, Siri, have pizza delivered to my house now. If you can do that, maybe you already can. Mm-hmm. If you can do that in Fortnite, now you got something.
But you're right. They've got to figure out a way to monetize it because at the moment, it's a quarter of the people in the globe are playing eSports and the revenues are a couple $1 billion.
Actually, so, Fortnite will do $5 billion.
I'm not sorry, Fortnite, but eSports overall.
Oh, right? eSports. Yeah, $1 billion globally this year.
Amazing. Yeah. So maybe we're arguing about moot points. I don't want to say moot, but, certainly changes.
Yeah. That the FANGs are the past. They're the past decade. They got big. Now they're being looked at. But the thing that's going to get big based on time, consumer time, will get ignored till it's really, really big. and hurtful.
And hurtful.
I mean, and that's when the government will look at it, when people are writing letters.
Yeah, right.
To the
A strongly worded letter to the government.
Yeah.
Right.
I should get somewhere.
So you think that they start paying attention once people start saying bad things, not just because they're big? Because right now, the idea is that they're going after these companies because, some people have antitrust issues, but basically because they're big, right?
Yeah, I think that is part of it.
I think it's they're big in that I think there's a lot more concern now over how your data is used. And we talked about this in the panel, which, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, it should be available on the TPI website. And data is, sort of the key thing. It's not just data exists, but how they use that data, which I think is the key. And I think and by the way, it may not be Fortnite in a year, maybe some other game, right? Sure. Fortnite, as far as I understand it, copied a game called PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, which then just didn't do as well as Fortnite. So you never know. But when you are playing these games, what you're not doing, to Laura's point, is you're not engaged in their world. They're not getting data on you other than that you're playing Fortnite. They know that, but they don't know they don't know that you've gone to the 7-Eleven, right? Because your phone is tracked constantly. You're out of that sphere, which I think has got to terrify these companies. Mm-hmm. They can't lose that.
They are losing.
They are losing that.
For
right?
under 25-year-olds. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you talk to people, policymakers are worried now about companies collecting data and what they might do with it. When you talk to investors, do they worry that Washington might take away the data stream, or do they see this not as an issue, or are they more worried about but Laura, what you're saying, that actually it's now other groups that are starting to get their hands on the data, and what are now the incumbents may lose out?
Well, I thought what was interesting on my panel just now with the entertainment, and really TPI ran an excellent agenda for both days, and I would give Brian's interview a 10 out of 10 in my panel, a 9 out of 10, because I brought down the average. But what I would say is, it was like the head of all the chief content groups, and they really felt content was king. But data was a big, I would say, argumentative point. And some of the content creators felt that aggregated data was enough. And some of them
felt... What does that mean, aggregated?
Aggregated means like Nielsen data.
Okay.
Like we know that 2 million people watched your piece of content and 5 million people watched somebody else's piece of content.
Good numbers.
Yeah, not that. But it's my point of view, and a couple of people on the panel, that you must have person-by-person data. You must have first-party data about what they're doing.
That's hard.
So, but Netflix has it in viewing, and Amazon has it in shopping, and Facebook has it in the 50 minutes a day you're spending there. So what the platforms have is data. So if the person moves and the new platform has data on the person, to Brian's point, you're becoming less valuable because you don't know what that person's doing off your platform. You've never known what they're doing off your platform, but they're about to be spending more time off your platform.
But are we overestimating the value of data? I do wonder sometimes, Laura, if there's so much data, can they really actually figure it out, like what to do with it all? I mean, they probably know 11 million data points about me, right? That I'm a white male over 6 feet who's in his mid to late 40s, got a couple of kids, live in New Jersey based on Waze. Here's my daily average commute. Here's how much I'm stopping at the gas station. They can figure these, but what can they really do with it? I do wonder.
No, I think data is relevant where it relates to the monetization engine. So what Netflix has on you is what you watch. So then it knows what to produce to tell you what to watch.
But that's good though. I like that.
Okay.
But we actually, do we know how successful that is? They say that they use data to think of what new shows to produce, but they don't really release any information to tell us whether their predictions are right. Whether they still make all their money off of Friends in The Office. Not anymore.
Friends is gone, baby.
The Office is gone.
That's Warner Media now.
So, maybe all the data is for naught.
But I think owning first-party data is the only thing that's protected. What the government's going after is when you have data and then you sell it for money to somebody else. That transaction is what they're really trying to lock down. The consumer knows you're going to sell that consumer data to a third party for money. So I think having first-party data, you're allowed, like Roku has 30 million connected homes, they're allowed to use their data to sell ads all day long. So they know what you watch, so they can target ads to you. So if they know how many hours of Netflix you watch a day, guess who they're targeting Disney Plus ads to?
Yeah.
All the people that are paying $12 for Netflix a month now, they're going to say for $7 you can have Disney Plus, or for $12.99, the same price you can have ESPN Plus Hulu and Disney
It's
Plus.
not random that they're all the same price effectively, or $1 less, or the way they're doing it is what you're saying.
That's true, but also that because Roku has that first party data, they can use it to monetize, and then they get a bounty from Disney from bringing new subscribers in the first 3 months.
And that's why the stock is up 200% or whatever this year.
300% this year.
I shortchanged them 100%.
And it's doubling.
But I mean, that's what data matters on a person by person basis, knowing what we're. So all data doesn't matter. I agree with you, Brian. But the data that you monetize matters a lot if you have better data than somebody that's aggregating.
But there's a part of me, I'm a huge, I don't know, Scott, do you like music? Okay, so I'm a huge music guy. I would say huge music guy. What I mean is thousands of CDs. By the way, I still buy them because I like to own the rights to my music. I make Apple Music and Spotify playlists for my friends and my family. I like to discover new music, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. The reason I mention this is that sometimes I wonder if these data recommendations are bad. Like if you like this band, right? The record company, whatever, Black Keys, then you should listen to this. But I wonder if it keeps me in a bubble, like in like a tunnel of music. And I'm not going, because it's not saying if you like the Black Keys, you should listen to Vivaldi, right? It's saying if you like the Black Keys, you should listen to the record company, which sort of is similar. If you like, Black Crowes, then you should listen to Blackberry Smoke, right? But like, so I wonder if there's a downside to data where these companies are actually holding themselves back because they're not, like if I like Ozark, I might like Bloodline, but like I'm not discovering something really different and changing my worldview.
Based on no information, except for what I see, it seems like that used to be a bigger problem. I mean, I like everybody else, Gen X people, I still remember 80s music and so listen to it. But when I used to listen...
Say it proud, man. There's nothing wrong with it.
Except the problem is when I used to listen to Pandora, all of my stations ended up being all Journey all the time. And it was terrible.
Sounds like you and Pandora need to go your separate ways.
We did. I use Spotify now.
Separate way. I didn't get any credit for that. Separate ways.
Oh, that was good.
Come on.
Man, that was good. I guess I blocked a lot.
But I think where I'm going to push back at you on that, Brian, is their business model is driven by time spent. So they want you to spend the most time. If they take a risk and tell you to listen to Vivaldi and you turn off Spotify or change the channel or worse, desubscribe to Spotify because Apple Music you like better, that is a lower risk.
So they're going to feed me stuff they know I'm probably going to like already.
And then elongate your listening time and then take the next recommendation, because probably what really happens in real life is you listen to one song of their recommended, and if you don't like it, you're out. And you just go back to your normal playlist. And they take that into account.
By the way, do dating sites work like this? I don't have any idea. It's like, do they just recommend the same type of potential mate? Because, sometimes you got to hey.
Maybe it's the same person.
It's like I'm sick of sick of steak every night.
Tara, now Sarah, now Ann, same person.
Jane, Jean, Joan. Like, where are we going with this? You know what I mean? Brian,
I didn't
Ryan.
like her when it was Jane. I still don't like her when she's Joan.
Everybody's named Brian, but they spell it Y-I-I-E-N.
Why do they spell it with an I?
No, the I is the right way.
Oh, I see, because that's your way.
That's the Gaelic way. That's the way.
Well, we'll get Brian Tremont in here.
But by the way, going back to your very first point, Scott, if you sort of, occasionally on my show, I'll say tongue in cheek, but there's a hint of truth to what I say. I'll say, if we go down to one of our awesome DC people, right? Amen or Elan or Kayla or anybody on air, then I'll say, let's go now to the new capital of Wall Street, Washington, DC. And I say that only semi tongue in cheek.
That's funny.
Because I've been doing this now for 20 years, which is just hard to believe. But I have watched DC's power grow in business exponentially. I mean, and forget about just business and technology. Look at every day the market moves if some Federal Reserve member belches, right? So it's the power of DC. And by the way,
or China tariffs is all DC.
My parents live 75 miles outside of DC. I went to high school in rural Virginia, a town called Winchester, which is like the only three things have come out of Winchester: apples, Patsy Cline,
and you.
And me, I guess. I'm not comparing myself to Patsy Cline. Yeah, my dad went to high school the same year as Patsy Cline. She went to Hanley, he went to James Wood. Anyway, so Winchester has almost become a suburb of DC now. I mean, it's gone from like 20,000 people to 110,000. Leesburg used to be like a sleepy, horse town village. Now it's the Loudoun County. And the reason I bring this up is, Scott, as you know, the power of DC has grown, but the size, everything has grown about DC. Its importance, its relevance, its size, its scope.
It's one of the reasons Amazon picked it as originally half of its new headquarters, I suppose.
I broke that story, by the way, because
Okay.
Virginia Tech, my alma mater, is involved in the innovation campus next door. Not revealing my sources. Virginia Tech. It's over now. So, no, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's grown. DC has grown in importance and relevance in our life. And you can argue that's good or bad, but it's certainly grown in business. Look at all the people that are here at this conference. I mean, heavy hitters for these companies are now based in DC.
So Phil Weiser is the Attorney General of Colorado, opened the conference, and you talked to Macon about the Attorneys General Hall, the 24, I guess, who are joining with them. It seems like every part of the tech economy, every time there's a choice to be made about whether states should have power or whether the power should be preempted, we choose to preempt their power. And it's under the idea that it's more efficient for anything digital to operate on as big a scale as possible. And that sounds kind of right to me, and the economics sounds right, but it's still part of the same trend, moving more and more power to DC. Do you think the digital economy is part of that? Does anybody else
Well,
care?
the digital economy is sitting in the Silicon Valley, and I guess you could argue Seattle. I mean, that's where the digital economy is. And I guess from content, you could argue LA, but the whole West Coast is where the digital economy is.
Right, and so maybe DC doesn't like that.
Maybe, but they're not going to move to DC. Because one of the things we see in business is there's really interesting academic work being done, that the right competitive unit is not a company, but it's actually a geographic region. And that the smartest people go to the geographic region that dominates that thing, whether it's hardware or software or content. And that therefore you get the call on the best people, and then they move up because it's connections based. And they share information because they change jobs. And therefore the cluster accumulates best practices faster and faster than anywhere outside the cluster. So, I mean, it's an economic
Nobody's ever
theory.
been able to displace Silicon Valley, even though they tried.
But isn't that sad though? Like, that's kind of sad though. Like, to me, that's a bigger issue. We talk about social inequality, economic inequality, wealth inequality. I've often thought, like, what if Facebook was based in Youngstown, Ohio?
It wouldn't be Facebook. Somebody else would have that
Are you sure?
role.
You really? What if?
Yeah,
how
I
do you,
believe
you think so?
I do. I think, MySpace would have either survived and been Facebook at half the size, or somebody else would have replaced Facebook. I do. I believe in this cluster theory. I believe that the best engineers...
Is it beneficial?
Yeah, I do think it is, because these are big, difficult, complex problems. And so you need a centralization for people to go there, the best engineers to go somewhere. And they don't want to go somewhere where they have to move their whole family to a different town when they get sick of their boss.
There's no job mobility. Once they're in a company, they're stuck.
In the middle of nowhere. They don't want to do that. So what they want to do is move from Facebook to Google to a startup once they've made their 10 million. And that's what happened. And Stanford's right there.
We know there are hundreds, maybe thousands of places have tried to recreate a Silicon Valley, and they think, it's just ingredients.
No
you got
way.
2 universities, and we'll give you this
And a couple of venture capitalists.
Yes, except the fact that teachers have to live 100 miles away because they can't afford a 3-bedroom, 2-bath
But then
ranch.
the alternatives you put in the middle of Iowa, and then nobody wants to
And
go.
nobody will.
But that's why we're seeing places like Austin pop up, Atlanta.
It's true. There are some successful examples, and
Sure.
Triangle Park.
But they're best
Yeah,
talent.
by the way, Fortnite is built in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Fortnite is not a Silicon Valley. What's the name of the Epic Games, I think?
Yeah.
Privately held, sitting there in a 3-story nondescript office building in Raleigh, Durham area. And they're going to become, already are just the company in the game that ate the world.
I know.
Yep.
I bet we see them move to Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
Do you think they will?
well, Netflix moved, being going to turn into a content company, it moved all but 3 people down to LA, which is a great example
Right, yeah.
of somebody starting the Silicon Valley as a tech company.
With all but 3 people. So Netflix has more people.
Has every person.
And I've
was
heard like their
forced-
lobby is like the place to be seen in Hollywood now. Like, hey, there's Leonardo DiCaprio. Here's Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Like that lobby is like
And they made an underground bridge into their news
for
so that you don't have
superstars.
to.
So like Laura Martin walks in,
Under
you
the
don't
bridge.
come into the door. You go in under.
But the point is, once they decided they were a content company, even they obeyed the cluster rules of coming into Hollywood.
But there's a difference, in my opinion, between and this is my opinion, not, whatever. It's between Netflix is like, I just watch TV on Netflix, right? Like they have, if they know like that I like Ozark or whatever, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Comcast, my company, my ultimate parent company, they've got great offerings. And they, by the way, have been super smart with their Xfinity remote. I'm not promoting the company. I'm just saying I use it at home. You can like click through to Netflix and stuff. Like everyone's kind of coming together. That's just watching TV. To me, that's data that's benign. Mm. Okay, they know I like this band or that show. Who cares? If they know that I'm, Googling, well, I don't want to say Googling, if I'm searching for on DuckDuckGo, if I'm searching for, do I have a ulcer? Okay, then that data, I read a book called Everybody Lies. Have you heard about this book?
No.
And it's basically how everyone lies to everyone about everything except to Google.
That makes sense.
And you because you Google, like, why do I have this rash?
Right. That's how very.
You're not gonna.
He says that everyone trusts Google. That's who you.
That anonymity, right? And we're not. No one's knocking Google here. I'm simply saying that it's like you tell the truth to Google because you're actually worried. Like, why have I had a headache for 7 days? Right. And God, never do that. By the way, everything's
like cancer.
Everything's you have brain cancer. Like it actually just maybe have a headache because you're dehydrated. You're in Aspen. But it's interesting how that data, that's to me as a consumer, not as a CNBC anchor, as a consumer, that's the data that worries me.
But I don't think that if you can't make money as a Wall Street analyst, if you can't make money, I don't care. So I don't care that somebody has that data. I care a lot if Netflix has your viewing data because that's what they're going to monetize. So what I care about is that guys have the first party data around the person's name that they can then monetize more effectively than a competitor who doesn't have that data on a person's name.
I mean, so first of all, I think that you could monetize some of it. And there's some types of information that you wouldn't want to share, but even some types of medical information you would. So like imagine you're here in Aspen and you type in, why do I have a headache? And they share with somebody's like, oh, it's because you're at 7,000 feet. And here's this product you can take and it'll fix it for you. Is that bad?
Oh, there's lots of stores around here that are trying to sell you all kinds of products.
No, including the water in the lobby, which is green. Because
the green lobby, with gummies, edibles. They'll solve anything here in Aspen, apparently. It's some interesting town. I've never been here. It's like coffee shop, restaurant, pot shop, $5,000 handbag. It's an interesting place. They're all interesting in their own way, by the way, every location. I guess, Laura, it's fun for me to do this because usually our interviews on TV are like 4 minutes.
Nice and long.
Apple's making a big play on privacy.
Yes, they are.
Like Apple's whole thing now is like, we're not selling your data. Yeah, you're going to pay for stuff, which is amazing because remember, if you're not paying for stuff, you're the product, right? But we need you to pay. But in doing, is that going to work?
Yeah, it's going to work.
Is it going to work with upper wealthier people, or is it going to work with everybody?
I would say they have a monopoly on the richest 15% of the world's population. 40% of Americans use an Apple phone, but around the world, it's only 15% of penetrated, and it's just a monopoly on the richest.
So people. I don't know if anyone else has brought this up. If not, and I guess we'll talk about maybe it has data inequality. Like, could you see it? Could you see a situation where wealthier people are going to be able to protect their personal data better than the rest of the population because they can buy out? Like, in other words, so Facebook, think about, and again, we're not picking on companies. What if Facebook said for $100 a year,
which is the break-even price?
Yeah, actually, that you can.
I would do that.
Opt out of all. I would do that deal too.
And I think so.
But a lot of people can't afford that $100.
Well, I mean, if data is a normal economic good, something that people are willing to pay for, then the first people who will pay the most for it are likely to be wealthy people because that's the way it is with everything. So wealthier people then, Scott, opt out.
Correct.
Of this world. They're able to buy their way out. They're buying their data freedom. How's that? Well, okay, but so the other way to put it is, and I'm not sure this is the right way to put it, but the other way to put it is, all right, here's this product that costs $100, but you can get it for free. So it actually allows people to access it who wouldn't be able to otherwise. I mean, just that's the other way of putting it. That's the truth. So no, and that's the beautiful thing about technology in so many ways. It's like is that people can. It doesn't matter what your income level is. You can search on Google. You can use Pandora's free product. There's so much free. You can use Gmail. They don't know if billionaire or whatever, they might know, but you know what I mean? You can use it no matter where you are. But I do wonder, Apple's whole thing is premium prices, but you're buying your way out of that data world. But which by the way, as a consumer, I think I like. Yeah, but and as Laura, you pointed out, Apple has this access, but to only a small share of the population that's very rich. But actually, low-income people are willing to pay for some things. And we learned that when mobile phones first came into existence in developing countries. At first, I worked at the World Bank, and so it's terrible. And the general advice was, cell phones are just a toy for the rich. Let's not worry about it. That's why the incumbent phone companies let them enter because they didn't think it'd be a threat. It turned out these people who have no money were able to buy cell phones because they value.
And by the way, they had better networks than we did here, and because they jumped the whole like hard line fiber optic.
Right, because they couldn't get hard lines, and there was such huge demand for it. So obviously, low-income people have less money because that's the definition of low income. But
they're willing to allocate.
I guess the point I'm making was that I do wonder if we're headed toward this. With so much talk around data, I wonder if we're headed toward a debate on data as a privilege.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know what I mean?
Two statistics on this. CBS All Access, you can pay $5.99 a month, or you can pay $10. 2/3 of their consumers pay $10, no ads, which means you're not this product.
2/3.
2/3. And they have 4 million subscribers in America. So 2/3 of that 4 million say, I'd rather pay $10 and have no ads. We saw with Pandora and Spotify, you both have a freemium model where it's free, and then they try to upsell you to the no ads model.
Yeah.
So in many cases, that's their ultimate goal, is to get you to pay.
And I'm always shocked when I talk to some of my friends and they're like, yeah, I don't do the premium version. I'm like, you don't?
Yeah.
Like you don't pay the $50 a year or whatever it is on Pandora. They're like, yeah, I don't mind the ads. I'm always kind of shocked by that. Now that just means I'm a snob, I suppose. And I work in the media, so I love advertisers. And I think that we're coming out with their own streaming product at some point. And you probably know a lot more about it than I do. I'm just a talking head on the air, but I wonder how many people will pay for all these services. Because that's to me, that's the fun question. 2 years out, how many of these companies are going to be left, Laura?
And that's when earlier, when there was all this, there was lots of pressure from sort of the so-called public interest groups to to have the government break up the bundle on cable. People would say, well, look, if you make everything a la carte, it's going to be a hell of a lot more expensive.
It's true. And it's going to end up being more expensive for the consumer, even though this is what the consumer
But will they have Netflix, Hulu, NBC's product, HBO Go or whatever it is, the Warner Media product? Will they have all of them?
No, I don't think so.
You know what terrified me if I was running one of these companies? I read a stat, I can't remember where, you'll forgive me, 28% or something like this of like streaming subscribers admit that they cancel on a monthly basis based on a show or something like this. Like they'll cut the subscription.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to manage your cash flow as a CFO when consumers are that fickle.
Well, one of the reasons Netflix had negative 100,000 subs in the second quarter is people turned off in April and May for Game of Thrones on HBO. They turned off their Netflix to save the $10 because they had to subscribe for $15 for 6 weeks of the Game of Thrones final season.
But they're like literally willing to go like 6 deep in the settings thing to figure out how to cancel their account. Because it's not ever easy to find.
But I guess it makes sense when you think about it. People like to watch shows. Nobody thinks, wow, I can't wait to get home and watch Hulu.
But how do you run a business like that, though?
Their churn is extraordinary. And the problem is the minute Disney Plus comes, and they all give you a freemium model, they'd all say, hey, 30 days free. Why wouldn't you turn off your Netflix if you're going to spend 30 days eating as much of Disney during the free period as possible? And if you can get your thought is, if I can get through all their good stuff, then I can go back to Netflix. But for the 30 days free, I'm going to watch as much Disney Plus as possible.
Can I listen, I know we got to wrap up, but I'm going to tell you, as a father of a nearly 5-year-old, I'm admitting I'm a terrible parent right now. The most genius invention of the last 3 years, but it's also the evilest, is the autoplay.
It's great.
If I don't monitor it, my son will sit there on an iPad and watch like Octonauts or whatever it is,
for 8 hours.
Now we're trying don't do that. I'm not, but I'm just saying the autoplay is ridiculous.
Well, one thing on your Apple phone, you can actually, as the parent, have screen settings for your son. So if he's playing too much Fortnite, you can make it stop for 10 minutes every hour, or you can say maximum screen time in any day over any 24 hours, 3 hours.
Of course, the problem is, as a teenager, you can have screen setting through your parents.
That's probably true. Yeah, that's probably true.
Screen time.
Because he can figure it out. My parents are limiting out their screen time.
Can we all just agree it's going to be a really interesting next few years with all this stuff? Because these companies have gotten, when we're talking on CNBC, $1 trillion market caps.
Yep. Yeah.
And you know who just quietly goes about their business is Microsoft.
Yeah.
$1 trillion market cap. 20 years ago, they were the poster child of antitrust. I was in law school when that case was going on, and then just kind of petered out and no one cared.
Well, some of it might have to do with what they learned during that time. They learned how to interact with DC. And the tech companies, they haven't figured it out yet.
Part of it is they're not consumer facing. Everything Microsoft does now is B2B. They don't face the consumer.
Well, they have
all
their
of the
service
tech.
You don't have a Zune?
I don't have a Zoom. But I think that's part of it.
Did
The
anyone ever
consumers
have
write letters to congressmen, and they're really, the government thinks it's there to protect consumers, and every platform they're going after is a consumer-facing platform.
But they still, they have their Surface product, which is small, but they still have an Office. Everyone uses Office.
Do you think the grocery stores are going to go after Amazon?
I think they'd like to. I think a lot of small businesses are being put out of business by Amazon, and there's a lot of. Adonis even has now been hired by a couple of these small independent shops that feel like Amazon bullies them. There's a lot of those small businesses.
And as we talked about before, at least like that, regardless of the facts behind the claim, it's a very discrete claim, and it's easier to bring a case when you have a very specific argument than something big and broad and saying we're going to break up the companies.
Yeah, but we need to be careful too. The United States has 5 times more retail space per capita than the next highest country or something like that. So it's right.
I'm not sure
it's very easy to say Amazon's killing retail, but maybe retail killed retail by growing too fast. Because I guess I'm so old, Scott, that I remember when Walmart was killing all the retail.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Right? It was Walmart's the enemy. Yeah. Suddenly Walmart's the good guy.
Yeah.
Because they actually employ people in your town. Right.
Right. Well, they seem to be a bad guy when they employ too many people, and a bad guy when they lay people off. And but yeah, people generally seem to view them in a more positive light than they used to.
As Macon said in there, big is not bad. It's big and behaving badly. That's the problem.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how he was talking about Standard Oil and how it was great at the beginning, but then it started doing anti-competitive things to maintain their monopoly. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah.
It's about maintaining your monopoly, not necessarily building your monopoly. And I thought you made a good point that monopolies aren't against the law.
They're not. A lot of people think they are.
Right. They can't be. If they were, nobody could invent anything. As soon as you invent it,
it's when you use it to tie to other products. That was Microsoft's big problem, right? It was if you want, I think it was, if I remember correctly, if you want Microsoft's operating system, which everyone did at the time, you had to use Explorer. Explorer was on your computer. Don't you remember when we used to buy new computers and they would come with 62 different pieces of software on them, and you're like, what the heck is this?
Right.
I don't want this. All that stuff is just jammed onto the computer and made it so unwieldy it would slow it down. Those were the days.
I was wondering how he would justify the actual sanctioned monopoly power of the NFL in these sports leagues, where the government does say it's completely anti-competitive.
Yes, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah,
it's a whole other topic, but
I just think that's interesting. It's just, they're talking out of two sides of their mouth.
Next year, you should have a sports track, Scott, at this conference.
We might, and we would have
or trade, eSports.
That would be beautiful. Actually, do an eSports and regular sports track at this conference next year. And we'll
you probably get viewers.
No, they're all
Brett Favre to come in and be on panel.
Antitrust exemptions. There's the NCAA, which is able to completely exploit its labor.
Yeah, that's true. And now the esports guys are going to mess that up because all the esports varsity players, they're getting their tuitions paid out of 90 universities. They're allowed to keep their winnings. Wow. When they go to a tournament, if they win $1 million prize pool to split it among the 4 of them, they get to keep their winnings.
And the football players getting just destroyed on the field. Gets a couple $100 for
or nothing.
And they do get tuition. So that
but so do the esports guys. 90 universities are giving
90 universities are now giving
varsity esports tuitions. Yeah, and they get to keep their winnings. So if I was the NC2A, that's stupid because all the growth is going to come out of esports, but there's no way they're going to join the NC2A if they take away their winnings.
Right.
So should I tell my 4-year-old to start playing golf or start playing golf online?
Online. I would say esports.
Well, you just need to turn off that autoplay feature and have him make sure he knows how to do it himself.
And also make sure he knows how to wash himself, eat, bathe, dress himself.
That's all optional in esports.
Because there's some there's some people, 20-year-olds, I'm not sure, are you aware of these things?
Yeah, it's true. That's right.
By the way, I'm just jealous. They didn't have these delivery services when I was in college. That would have been spectacular. Pick up the phone, Uber Eats. $5 right at your door.
I know.
We had it. That was it. You had
Domino's pizza.
Pizza was your delivery option.
Sure. Now you can have anything.
Now you can have anything you want
Anytime.
anytime.
Never leave your room.
Yeah, that's true.
humanity should be a reason.
But, you know, part of that is that the kids are getting married at 30 now. And so for 10 years, especially women, they don't want to go and sit in a restaurant alone, both because of the safety, but also because of the social stigma.
Yeah.
And these women and men too, they have a lot of money. They're usually really hard workers. And they want, so now there's whole services that not only deliver food, but they deliver it with the perfect napkin from the place with the logo, the perfect outline. It comes in a box. It's magnificent. And it's all about feeling like you're in the restaurant without the inconvenience. You can work through dinner. And nobody has
going out is fun because then you get to talk to people. Of course, I'm, listen, I clearly like to talk.
Part of the reason that might be you eating in by yourself so that like maybe you can wear a bib and just be a slob. I don't know.
And nothing, only a bib. Nothing else, just a bib. So, hey, whatever you want to do, man, you do you.
Exactly.
As they say. Okay? But let's be clear, it's kind of gross.
It depends what you're eating.
Yeah, it depends on what you're eating. Naked lobster, that's a thing. I'm going to Maine tomorrow, actually. So maybe I'll try that. I don't know.
Tweet that.
What's that?
You don't have to tweet that.
Yeah, no. I do know this though. There are I read, and there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, whatever the number is, something like 1 of every 4 food delivery drivers admitted to sampling your food before they brought it to your house. Did you guys see that study?
That's disgusting.
Because it's like you're sitting in the car. There's French fries. Oh, it's French waffle fries. I'll just have one.
If you're allowed to use that to decide whether or not you should get the food, it might be okay. I've gotten such terrible food from deliveries. If I knew that
because it's soggy, it's cold.
Right, exactly.
Driver tested.
The driver's like touching doorknobs and petting dogs and then grabbing your food and then wiping the snot off his nose, then going back into your bag. Is that what's happening?
I think you should
I'll take the restaurant. Maybe I'm just an old man.
One last question and then we can go. One last question. Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, no, I'm pretty good. I just want to talk more about...
John Denver is always the answer here.
There is a John Denver sanctuary here.
There should be. The man did a lot for
I don't understand.
Aspen.
What did he pay for?
Rocky Mountain High. No, it's probably a tribute to him.
Yeah,
like they name streets in D.C. after famous people. It's probably a tribute.
Right. We have the 2 of them parked.
What are we going to be talking about in a year we should have been talking about today?
I don't know. You answer that. I'm in the media. I don't know anything.
What should we...
A year. A year isn't that long.
You mean in technology or on a Mac? Because I was just in Hong Kong. They got some stuff going on over there, but I assume you mean like why we're here at this conference.
Well, by the way, I mean, if this whole tariff trade war mean China, Hong Kong, because you were saying yesterday that what's going on in Hong Kong is affecting Trump's stance on China on the tariffs.
Yes, that's why I was there.
So exactly. So if we are all underestimating that, it totally can tank markets and the economy.
Sure. Can we also remember
which
though
is really bad for ad-driven businesses?
It was only 12 years ago that BlackBerry had a 70% market share in phones or something like that.
That's right.
Now it's like 0.6 or, some people forgot they had it in their
12
drawers.
years before that, it was Nokia.
It was Nokia, Symbian. Remember their operating system? We're aging ourselves. So what are we going to be talking about next year? I hope it's the rise of more discussion around data privacy. Because I think that it's like that famous Target case, Target the store. I don't know if it was a case, but like it's like a teenage girl. I don't remember this. There was a teenage girl, and like they kept getting adverts for like cribs and stuff at the house, and the dad was like, basically, or somebody called Target and was like, "Hey, stop sending us. We have a teenage daughter. Like, what are you trying to?" And it turned out the girl, I guess, was pregnant and had been online searching for stuff, and she didn't want to tell her parents. And I might have the story a little bit wrong, but you get the idea where that was like the data broke a news to the family that should have been incredibly personal and difficult. And so I think we're going to have more difficult conversations around data privacy. I also think we'll have conversations around the role of social media in our society, because it's pretty nasty out there sometimes.
Well, I think if we go under a recession and suddenly all of these fixed cost businesses watch their top line fall by 10%, their EBITDA line fall by 20%, and their EPS fall by 50%, suddenly this whole thing about being investigated for antitrust as you're watching them lay off people and fall off a cliff, which ad-driven businesses do in any kind of recession. And by the way, if the capital markets close because of this China tariff trade war, if capital markets close, Netflix will bankrupt itself. It has $3 billion of cash on its books, and it's owed over the next 12 months. It owes people $3 billion because it spends $13 billion, of which it can only fund 10 from internal.
So actually, you're saying if there's a recession, and there has to be one sometime, we have not overcome the business cycle. that all of these talks about breaking up companies and antitrust will all just disappear.
They have to disappear because these companies are going to be basically they're going to look horrible because and not only are they fixed cost businesses, Google's a fixed cost business. Facebook is taking up its cost by $1 billion extra a year in order to meet these privacy concerns. So it isn't really a fixed cost business. It's a rising cost business for privacy at a time when revenue would fall 10%.
Do you think
overnight.
Facebook will ever go to a pay model?
I think Facebook might go out of business. I think the government wants to put them out of business.
We're going to end it there. You should have started the whole podcast with that.
Right.
Can't end it with that.
Switch it around.
Yeah.
But wait,
You can't end it with that.
Because the government's going to put
Part
them out of
two.
business, or because they're done.
I think their brand is so mistrusted in Washington, D.C., that I think the government really would like to see Facebook not exist as a brand / company. And I think the fact that Facebook then introduced Libra, which was so tone deaf, because what Libra tries to do is just intermediate the financial system globally, means they can't be trusted to survive. That if they let them survive, it might be that in 10 years or 20 years after all these legislators...
Nobody is forced to be on these platforms. That's the thing. No one forces you to go onto Facebook. You know what I mean?
That's true. I agree with that. This has nothing to do with the consumer. This has to do with fear in Washington of the power of Facebook to put things.
When you start talking about elections, then yes, when politicians, when democracy is brought up.
But actually, the pushback on that is that all the politicians need Facebook too. I mean, they devote huge campaign budgets to advertising on Facebook and Google. They don't. I don't know. They don't know what to do without it anymore. Maybe it'll just be politicians only.
Maybe.
We'll
I'm on Friendster. I think that's the future. MySpace and Friendster.
So you and your friend.
They're waiting.
You and your friend.
They're just plotting their comeback. They're just waiting. Pets.net.
Yeah, it's the long game.
I've been through 3 cycles now, Scott. I'm starting to feel like an old man, right? I mean, the internet bust.
Yeah.
Boom
financial
bust,
crisis,
boom
and whatever the next one is that's coming, and something is coming.
Yeah, it's got to. They haven't overcome.
It's healthy, Bob. I mean, you can't just.
No,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
cycle
a different conference.
Yep.
Okay.
That's Fed,
Great.
That's Fed
pleasure.
Jackson
Thank you all
Hole.
very much.
Laura,
It's a
that's
pleasure.
awesome.